This story is happened about 10 years ago, and maybe not even 10 years ago, but it's a story of probabilities. How unlikely is this? It's hard for me to believe that what happened happened. And what it was a trip that I had taken my oldest son and his wife to Italy for a vacation. I had promised to take him, but we never got around to it. In the meantime, he got married, so they both came. And we went there, and we were touring northern Italy, and we had no real agenda. We were going to the mountains way up north. We were going to be to Venice. We were going to be to Rome. We were doing, again, all the highlights of all over Italy. So on the first day, I shouldn't say the first day, but we ended up in Florence, and we were standing in line at this Uffizi Museum, just waiting to get in. It was a very long line, and we noticed the people in front of us were talking English. So, and most people were Italian there, and of course I don't speak Italian, so we struck up a conversation with them. As it turns out, he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm from Massachusetts." And he said, "We are too. Where?" And they narrowed it down. Turns out that they're from Springfield, and of course I'm from Northampton. Well, that's not a huge deal. That happens from time to time. So we thought that was pretty interesting. We're halfway across the world, and we meet these people that are 10 miles apart that I never met in my life. But that was the beginning of the story. And so we went back to our place, which was in the middle of nowhere, to our motel. And next morning we got up and said, "Well, where do we want to go?" Well, I let Kathy make the call because she was the devout Catholic, and she wanted to go to Assisi, where St. Francis came from. So this is like an hour and a half or drive from where we were. So we drive over to Assisi, and we were touring this. It's a huge place. There were thousands and thousands of people there, and multiple levels and churches and shops and all kinds of things like that. So, and we had gone down to this tomb, and we were walking up this stairway, and we were coming up one stairs, and we looked across, and there were the same people. There was a mother and father and their son. And here we now were in the eastern part of Italy the next day, and there they are. We run into them. So we had a laugh over that, and we said, "Well, what are the odds of this? This is pretty doggone amazing." And I'm calculating the odds of that. I figured if I said, "I'll meet you in Assisi," I could have spent a week and never ran into the people. But there they were. So after that, we went back, stayed overnight, and next morning, no, I take that back. We drove to Rome. We drove to Rome, deposited the car, got our hotel room, and now we're in Rome. We wake up the next morning, and we say, "Well, where do we want to go now?" So she says, "Well, we have to go to the Vatican. That's got to be the highest priority." So we decided you can't. It's a crazy city there. We walked. We put our tennis shoes on. We walked over there, and as it turned out, there were thousands and thousands of people there, and this was one of those days that the Pope was going to come out, and we didn't know that even. We didn't even know that when we went there. But we walked in, and people had tickets. We didn't. They let us in after they wanded you and everything. And we went up, and there were thousands of these chairs, just folding chairs that were in this big piazza. Like we sat down at the chairs, and we were told that the Pope won't be out for like 2 hours, but there will be some other people coming out before that. We no sooner sat down and we turned around, and there were those same three people standing right behind us. And we said, "What are they? This is incredible." I mean, here we are, hundreds of miles away again, with we're not on any tour or anything like this. We're all doing our own independent thing. So I said, "This is just unbelievable that this would happen." So anyway, we finished the day touring there, and the next day we went to the Colosseum and everything, and had a lot of tours. And we were even contemplating going to a tour at night, and I said, "I don't think so. I'm toured out. Let's walk home, and if we see a place to sit down and have a drink, let's do it." So we're on our way walking home. We sit down at this. It's a huge piazza, just thousands of people there. We're sitting at this table, and I just jokingly said to Kathy, I said, "Well, what is the deal? Here we are in Rome, and we haven't seen our friends yet. I don't understand. What's wrong with this picture?" She said, "Isn't that the kid right over there, 10 feet away, sitting right there?" And so that's really it. I thought, if I was going to calculate the odds of running into those people in any place in Italy 4 times in 4 days, I would have said it was in the billions. But anyway. Okay, this little story is about how I almost died, and I've not forgotten it, even though this was probably 45 years ago. I was in upstate New York. I had just learned how to fly. I was always interested in flying, piloting an airplane, so I learned how to fly. And I joined a flying club, and then I ended up buying a little 2-seater airplane, all within a space of about 2 months. 2 or 3 months. I had my student pilot license. And I bought this airplane from a real perfectionist of a pilot. He was very good on, even though it had no electrical system or anything, it had wind-driven instruments, and you could fly by looking at the instruments if you had a co-pilot there talking to you. And so we practiced instrument flight on that a lot. So I learned proficiency at instrument flight at a very, very few hours that I had. And so that particular plane, the fabric on it was getting rotten. So I had taken it down to Pennsylvania I actually was forced down in Pennsylvania in an ice storm. And while I had it there, it was out of license. It needed to be fixed and repaired. So I left it there and I went back to New York again. So when the plane was ready to be picked up, I was at my home airport at the time, which was Fulton, New York. And I was looking for a ride, some fellow pilot to fly me down to pick up my airplane so I could bring it back. It was probably a fairly good sized ride. So there was this fellow there, a student pilot and a licensed pilot, who had this beautiful Cessna 170 tail dragger, just like brand new. I mean, I could only dream to have a plane like that. So he said, well, I'll take you down. So there was the guy that owned the plane, who was the student. Then there was a licensed pilot who would sit right front seat. Then there was me, and then there was another guy that was there. Said, I'll go along for the ride. So I'm sitting behind the pilot in the back, and the other guy sitting in the right rear seat. And so we take off. It's a beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon, and he has in this airplane what's called a Super Homer. It's like the early vintage with a cranker on it to tune in stations where you could fly to these Vortex stations, VOR stations. And I didn't have, of course, even an electrical system in my airplane, so this was pretty fancy stuff. So we're cruising along, and as we approach the lakes, the Finger Lake area, there is the clouds. There's a bank of clouds, and so he just barrels right along and just enters those clouds and starts to climb. He says, well, we'll just get up on top. So we're all pretty young and ignorant, thinking we're pretty invincible. We've got this radio, so we can do anything. So we're climbing up and climbing, and I'm like, bug-eyed. I'm in the back, and I'm looking. I know this is the guy flying the plane is a student pilot, and I know the guy on the right. Well, I don't know what the guy on the right. Well, he was a private pilot, but not instrument rated. So he's climbing, and I'm watching the artificial horizon and the instruments, and he's doing a good job. He's keeping it straight and level. He's in a climb. He's doing everything properly, and then somebody, I think it was his co-pilot, the pilot, looked out and said, we got some frost on the wings. So he turned his head and he looked at the wing, and when he looked at the wing, it broke his concentration on the instrument on a panel, and he lost control of the airplane. He just simply didn't know what it was doing, and he sort of panicked. And so now we're in the clouds above the Finger Lakes in a wintertime. And he just lost control of the airplane. The next thing I know, the plane, I could tell from the needle pegged left, the plane was in like a death spiral going straight down, and the wind was building up, and the guy in the right seat had enough. He pulled the throttle back. At least he wasn't full power going straight down, but and there it was, and I could see right away where he was. He was in a left spin. So I screamed in his ears. I just leaned forward and said, right rudder, center the needle, right rudder. I just was screaming in his ears. Right rudder. He stepped on the right rudder. I said, center the needle, center the needle. He did this, and just as the needle centered, that meant he stopped the turn. We popped out of the bottom of the clouds, probably 300 feet from the hills of the Finger Lakes. Had we been in that continuing spiral, it would have all been killed. And when he popped out the bottom, he could see, and now he could see, but he was so rattled he didn't know what to do. I just said, turn right, you know, to this heading. He turned right and stay low and just fly. And you know, as time went by, he regained his composure, but he turned around and took us back where we came from, underneath the clouds. And but I think about that. Had I not been there, they would have all been dead. Had I not been practicing that earlier, that particular technique, I wouldn't have known what to say or what to do. And I just look back on that and say that's probably, and of course I've been flying for 45 years since, but that was the closest I think I ever came to, and I had no control sitting in the back seat.
Hey, the most experience I've had best of my life was having a store here in Northampton for 9 years. Things went well at first. Economy got rough. The landlord could have been a little bit more workable with me and put me through a lot, and now I'm no longer in business, but it was a fun time. I enjoyed meeting all kinds of people from all over the world up here, college students. I had some real wild experiences, did some fashion shows. It was a fun time in my life. I'm doing other things now with the business, but I'm not doing a store anymore, and I'm enjoying it still. And I feel that the landlord was very unfair. I'm not going to say anything bad about you people, but I just feel that you could have worked a little bit more with me, because I see people on the streets when I come up here in Northampton, and they ask me, where's my new shop going to be, and I tell them there's not going to be a shop. I only go flea markets and I sell on eBay. But it was, like I say, an experience up here. I'm on with my life, and I just want to thank Northampton for letting me be here for the short time I was here.
All right, so the most impulsive thing I did was back in January. I was driving around with my friends Grant and Nick at 3 in the morning in Boston, and of course there's nothing to do at 3 in the morning in Boston, when Grant all of a sudden says, hey, there's a 24-hour LL Bean store in Freeport, Maine. So we called our friend John, got directions, and at 3:30 in the morning drove up to Maine, watched the sunrise, and then went to the LL Bean store for about 5 hours and just hung out there all day.
Our most See, I can't do it. Our most frightening experience was a couple years ago when we were camping at Cape Cod. We thought we were being attacked by bears. But they were really we were all laying in our tent. We were just settling down for the night, and this crazy noise sounded like ripping and tearing, and things being all thrown everywhere, and we didn't know what was going on. So scared. So we were all like holding on to each other and just we were the next morning, and no, we were with this guy, and he was supposed to be like our big protector. That's why we brought him with us. But he's like he's hiding under the blankets. He crawled underneath both of us, and he was freaking out. He was so upset about the whole thing. He's like, I'm gonna die.
Oh, Matt
It was great. And then we woke up the next morning and we saw just all of our stuff thrown all over the place. They ate our s'mores stuff. And we told our neighbors, and they just told us that it was the raccoons that were out there. It just sounded like Coco, who we named Coco later on, but we didn't sleep in the tent anymore. Yeah, we got a little scared of the tent.
So we crammed 9 of us into a trailer.
Yeah.
So the most intense and transcendent moment of my recent life was when Willem here was born last year, and you know, the whole experience really starts when you get pregnant 9 months earlier, but it comes down to those last 5 minutes, and we were going to do a home birth. My wife was in labor for like a day and a half. She started her contractions actually through a series of acupuncture treatments where they hooked up the cables, little electric cables, to the needles in her back. We were in our acupuncturist's home, and she said, well, you know, this should work. I'll just leave the room now. And, you know, a little nipple stimulation would actually help this process along as well. So between the acupuncture and the nipple stimulation, we left that appointment having contractions about every 3 minutes or so and drove home. And my wife got very tired over the process of of laboring that full day and night. So we decided to go into the hospital the next morning, and we're in the, and she's finally in the pushing phase, and she just looks like a samurai up there on the table, and I was standing there coaching her, and you just couldn't see anything happening, and her belly was still enormous, and she's on the table, and the nurses are all saying, okay, when the baby's born, you know, this is all going to happen about 10 minutes from now, and you just don't, it just seems utterly implausible that anything is actually going to come out of all of this effort. And finally we concluded that his head was sort of caught behind her pelvic bone. So the OBGYN came in, this wonderful woman. We were down in Holyoke, and they get this little suction cup. It's like a little half cup measuring device with a little tube on the end of it, and they stick it into my wife's vagina, and it just disappears, and then they pump this little pump thing, and then suddenly she's playing with it like a joystick at a computer console, and my wife is pushing, and you know, things are starting to stretch, and it's just getting really uncomfortable, and we're just yelling with each push and each contraction, and then there was this resting period, and our midwives, who had sort of had to take a back seat because we had gone to the hospital, had this moment, and it was great that they were there, and that the doctors and the nurses allowed the midwives to be there. They had a good relationship. So the OBGYN said, well, you know, we just need a little more energy. You know, you've got to give us a little bit more energy. And they looked at the midwives and they said, do you have anything for energy? And suddenly the midwives, who had brought their little like homeopathic kit along, you know, were like, yeah, we can do energy. And they like ran off and they got these little vials of stuff, and they came around and they stuck this little, did shots of aromatherapy for everybody in the room, all the nurses and midwives, including my wife and myself. And then with that sort of like little natural boost, my wife gave a few last shoves, and Willem came, you know, just came slithering out, and they grabbed him and wrapped him up so quickly and put him on his chest, and we didn't know whether he was a boy or a girl through the pregnancy, and we didn't see as he came out whether he was a boy or not. And they put him on my wife's chest, and he lay there. He started to take his first breaths, and you know, I was just laughing and crying and just overwhelmed with emotion and relief, and so then after about 20 minutes we said, well, okay, should we see what we got? And then we pulled back the towel and saw that he was a boy, which I was really kind of hoping that it would be a boy, you know, and so I just said, yes, he's the man! And then they had me cut the cord, you know, and it's like one of those experiences where you think you should take a moment to sort of let the sort of significance of separating your son from his mother, and then this umbilical attachment that they've had for 9 months, you know. But you know, the way life is, you know, sometimes in the moment you're just focused on doing it right and not screwing up, and so, you know, I just kind of looked at the cord and had these scissors in my hand and cut through the thing, and that was it. And we spent a couple of days in the hospital and recuperated, and it was just kind of like a little like sort of protected time for us to sort of rebound from this intense experience and sort of feel the presence of this new little guy in our lives.
Well, hello. My name is Nokiko, and I live in the Northampton area. What I'm going to tell you about was an astounding event that happened, I believe it was June 22nd, 2000, here in Northampton, at the intersection of Main and Pleasant Street, which is also Route 9 and Route 5, which are interstates. There was an execution planned in Texas for one Shaka Sankofa, at the time when George Bush was running for his first presidency, he was the governor of Texas, and really not liked at that time either. So we planned a bit of a on-the-fly protest of this execution and of his general policies with the death penalty. About 8 people, it started out with 7, but I believe 8 people, we handcuffed ourselves together at the intersection during one of the crosswalk beep-boos. And what happened was, basically we blocked traffic for about a half an hour on both Main and Pleasant Streets. There were about 400 people that came out of the shops, workers, kitchen workers, and just pedestrians stopping, and people coming out of their apartments to stand and watch as the police in Northampton tried to get us to leave. But as we were very good that summer at doing nonviolent resistance and direct action, we basically sat down so that the traffic would stop trying to edge close to us. And it was really kind of a whirlwind what happened. You know, the police from East Hampton came, Northampton State Police, a helicopter for 8 individuals. We were all in our early 20s, standing there, you know, chanting protest chants and watching the reaction of the people in Northampton, that they were, you know, quite astonished. And the really beautiful thing about it was that there were people coming off the sidewalks into the streets to join us, to make sure the cops weren't manhandling us, and which they were anyway, but there were people with children coming up and standing with us. Some people who had no idea what was going on just saw us, read our small information flyer, and joined and went to jail with us to Northampton. The whole event lasted a couple of hours. There was a vigil at the jail for 2 days while we were in there, and the most interesting part of the whole thing is I was at this random party this weekend, and a girl said, "Are you no Kiko of the Northampton 8?" As in like Seattle 7 or you know, Weather Underground. And what they said, she said to me, "I was 15 years old and my father was doing a documentary about you guys, and you're no Kiko, aren't you? You were with the Northampton 8?" And I said, "Yes, who are you?" And then I remembered this little girl, well, 15, which seemed little at the time. Now she's 20, goes to Holyoke College, and she had a button that said "Crackheads for Bush." And I remember her now, and she just was so surprised to see me, and it was really a pretty interesting validation 5 years later that people still remember our names and what we did. And there hasn't been anything like that in Northampton politically for a long time. An actual lockdown in the streets that affected everything, and our charges were trumped up because it was 2 interstates, which is what Main Street and Pleasant Street are, Route 5 and Route 9. So that's the most astounding thing I've seen in a couple of years. I think that the most interesting thing about it is that it hasn't happened recently. I mean, in the past 5 years, there haven't been impromptu direct actions. There haven't been, you know, actions that were not sort of sanctioned by the police, or there have been parades and candlelight vigils and things that we've gotten permission for, which is a different way of going about things, though it is still effective. You know, during the beginning of the war, there was a theatrical performance, a street performance at that same intersection that the AFSC got the police permission and therefore got a police escort, and was very safe. More for dramatic reasons, though. What I would like to see more of, which I can't participate in so much because I have a daughter now, but is to see these young people that have a lot of energy stopping traffic, stopping business as usual here in Northampton, because, you know, it's not like we're not affected by the war, and it seems like it's just going to keep going on, that we're going to be displeased with our government's policies and what they're doing. It wasn't that difficult, you know. We decided what to do that afternoon, and by 6:30 we were in the streets with a total of 450 people, and in Northampton, in cute, quaint little Northampton, which I think is what makes it so neat. You know, this used to be, this park we're sitting in right now had a tent city in it before because of homeless shelters being shut down. This has been a place, you know, you can ask someone like Francis Crowe from the AFSC. This was a haven of activism in the 50s and 60s in the anti-war movements, and still is, but on a different level. You know, people are the people who are active are a little bit older. And the young people, what we do now is we go for bicycle rides through town. We have concerts or we have gatherings, Food Not Bombs in the park, things like that. But I haven't seen anyone just put their foot down and say, everybody stop what you're doing right now and listen to us. This is what needs to be heard. And I'm sure that those 400 people had no idea who Shaka Sankofa was, and he did end up getting executed. We didn't actually change the outcome of it, except that more people knew about it and perhaps maybe became active against George Bush later on for various reasons. But that's something that I haven't seen in a long time. There's obviously mass protests that happen all over in major cities, but this is a very small city, and to see that kind of support and that kind of awe from the people who live here, they wanted it. They totally needed to see it, that something was going on, that, it's all about consuming it here, and it's all about the businesses, and you don't come to Northampton and not buy anything. Even I bought something today, I didn't mean to. So what I think is really amazing is that it did happen, that it can happen again, and maybe this will be good. Maybe this, with some of the footage, will show that 8 people made this huge difference one day, if only for an hour, right in Northampton.